I understand you were not familiar with the MCU before this. So did you binge all the movies before? Did you pick and choose? Did you just watch Civil War to see Black Panther?
It's a good question. I got the cheat sheet of where I should start, but I tried to watch everything by the time we had to shoot. And yeah, it was a totally new language for me. I mean, I didn't even know how to read a comic book. I started with that.
I still don't know how to read a comic book. So.
Literally, it's left to right, up and down. Like it's a different language. And you know, superhero films in general were not something I grew up with. So I had to sort of learn the rules in order to hopefully break the rules.
Was there anything you saw in those previous movies that you wanted to use or include in Black Panther?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and there was a lot that I actually really fell in love with. I mean, I discovered something that, you know, now I'm a fan. But, you know, the way that they introduce all of the characters, it's like these sort of epic moments whenever you meet somebody new. Obviously, you know, the action sequences, you get to see some really stunning work. I mean, there's a lot of things about the Marvel Universe that I'm now a fan of.
This is the biggest movie in terms of scope that you've worked on. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of that?
I mean, the advantages are, in theory, that you get time. I felt like, by comparison, probably to some of their other films, it was quite rushed. But, you know, compared to Mudbound, it was luxurious. You know, and you get some toys. Like, we had a Technocrane with an Oculus head for almost the whole shoot. You know, there are films where I've had to beg to get, you know, half a crane with a 2-axis head for one day. So you get to experiment in ways that you maybe don't get to on some of the smaller films. And, you know, I think obviously it's a much bigger machine, so it can often be a slower boat to turn. I think Ryan, if there was anybody who found a way to sort of make the biggest independent movie you could ever make, it's Ryan Coogler. And we definitely did things our way, and at times we sort of, you know, broke the mold, I think. But it still was, you were trying to turn the Titanic sometimes.
Mm-hmm. How do you shoot with IMAX and like all the special effects in mind?
The biggest thing with IMAX is that it's a different aspect ratio. So the best thing you can do for yourself is identify the scenes that are going to be IMAX ahead of time and stick to that plan, which we did. And so you're composing for 191 instead of 239, and you know that that's what that's going to be. I think where you get into trouble is when something becomes IMAX after the fact, and you know you're composing for one aspect ratio and it becomes a different one.
Mm-hmm. In Wakanda especially, like the colors are so bright and there's a vibrancy to it that's just very saturated. And was that something you guys discussed, how to shoot Wakanda?
Yeah, well, interestingly, like Caleb, we spent a lot of time in Africa before we shot, and that became a huge, you know, reference for us. I think if anything, you know, I'd like to think that Wakanda is a love letter to Africa. And, you know, we discussed wanting the light there to feel very different than the light anywhere else in the film. And, you know, what that would look like. So, you know, I think our approach was a warm afternoon sunlight that, you know, I said to somebody the other day that if we could have sort of Terrence Malick'd all of Wakanda, that was what we would have loved to do. But, yeah, I mean, I think the main thing was that it felt different. And certainly when you go to London, it's very monochromatic. It's very neutral. It feels very different than Wakanda.
Mm-hmm. There is one, like, sequence outside in Wakanda that's a little darker. It's still bright, but it's like kind of gray, and that's when T'Challa and Killmonger are fighting because it's like clouds in the background. And I thought that was just a great like visual representation of, you know, this dark force coming in to take over. Yeah. So was that something you guys discussed as well?
Yeah, very much so. And also how to make those two Warrior Falls fights feel completely different. So, yeah, I mean, I was looking at references of sort of what it looks like, you know, when the sun comes out after a storm and you sort of have these deep gray blue clouds, but then also warm light and the juxtaposition of those, you know, color contrasts, basically. And then, you know, how to achieve that with a certain amount of, you know, pairing of natural light and VFX.
Mm-hmm. I also like the way the clothes popped on screen, because, I mean, I think, you know, a lot of credit goes to the costume designs. But like compared to, you know, like his suit in Civil War, which is a different suit, like there in here you could really see the details.
Yeah.
And like was there a way you shot that to make sure it popped on screen?
Yeah, I mean, I camera tested the hell out of his suits. That was sort of my first, the first thing I took from watching Civil War is we can't shoot this suit for a whole movie. And I sort of had to abashedly go to Marvel and say, we're not going to use that suit, right? And thankfully they were all, on board. I think that there's a tendency as soon as a character gets their own film, they get their own suit too. So it was experimenting with ways that obviously it had to be black. He's called the Black Panther and not the Blue Panther and not the Metal Gray Panther. But we tested sheen, varying degrees of sheen and varying degrees of, opacity in the material. And that was a process to find something that was going to work, especially because we had a lot of night work with the suit. So you can't have a matte black suit at night, especially when it's like the forest in the jungle in Nigeria, and expect where there's nothing but moonlight to light the suit and expect it to resonate. So.
Let's talk about the casino fight, which was awesome. And I love that it was on 2 floors, because a lot of fights are just on 1 floor. And then there's that great shot of Okoye like jumping and sliding to the first floor. So how do you guys go about shooting that?
Well, that kind of ties into your original question about, how is it different and or fun to shoot big movies, because we actually got to build the set around the fight, around what we wanted to do with the camera. That was a collaboration with Hannah Beachler, our production designer, and our stunt choreographer, and, obviously, myself and Ryan. And literally we were building a set with pick points in mind, with, cable cam in mind, with stunt moves in mind. And that was such a different experience than, Fruitvale Station, where I'm in Ryan's aunt's house, hiding under a cabinet, trying not to catch on fire on the stove, because that was what we were given. Here we're literally building a set to do camera work that we wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been 10 months since your historic Oscar nomination. And now that there's been some distance, like, have you noticed any changes in the industry since you got your nomination, and how does it feel to be a role model for so many people now?
I guess it's a 2-part question. Yes, I think the change is really palatable, really evident, and exciting. I think, I'm seeing more and more women in the camera department. I'm seeing more female grips and electrics. I'm seeing, more women getting the chance to make the leap from smaller films to bigger films. That was sort of, for me, it took, I think, 7 Sundance films before I got a small studio movie. And, it's exciting to see, women out there and people of color who shoot a small movie and get a chance to do something bigger, which is what we saw so many of our sort of counterparts getting to do. As far as being a role model, it's taken some getting used to. I think probably all the DPs in the room would agree that we're behind the camera for a reason. And it was definitely, I was thrust into the spotlight in a way that was, not easy for somebody who likes to hide behind the lens. But the platform has been liberating in a way too. I think I'm realizing now that, there's conversations that really need to be had. For me, it's particularly around motherhood and filmmaking, and how to have,
You posted a great Instagram in August for working moms and pregnant women.
And it went viral, which I wasn't expecting either. And it was sort of a revelation that this is a conversation that needs to be had. And so now I'm trying to, figure out ways to kind of communicate things about the work-life balance and what we can do to help that situation. Because it's not just women. Men who are, in this industry are leaving their families for nine months out of the year to make a film. And at the end of the day, these films don't love you back, so it's finding a way to have your cake and eat it too, and what we can do to support that.
Mm-hmm. What has the response from women in particular been like since you posted that?
That was the revelation for me, is so many people have said, that it was either what they need, they needed that, there was, an inspiration, I guess, to know that they can pursue this career and still have a family, that's not a sacrifice that they have to make, or that, they don't have to hide being pregnant. I fully hid my pregnancy, my first, with my son, and then, maybe because of the visibility, I didn't have to with my second, but I feel like I have to, being public about it was so that other people, can be as well.
Mm-hmm. So are you returning for Black Panther 2?
I would imagine so. I hope so. We're still in the very early stages. Ryan has to write it first, and I hope he takes his time with that, because, this one, I think the hardest thing is you get sort of backed into the deadline. So he was, writing.
Because you went from Mudbound into Black Panther, right?
Yeah. Well, there was that too. But yeah, no, I would definitely go back to. I would do anything with Ryan. He's the best.
Would you want to shoot any other MCU film now that you've got your feet wet with comic book characters?
Maybe. I mean, it really would depend on the film. For me, the thing that was so special about Black Panther is that, there's some strong messaging, and it was important messaging, and it was a film that had, we got to have fun, but we also, got to impart, a value system and sort of expose the world to cultures that they hadn't seen. And I think if I saw another film with that potential, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us.